What up, Wizards? It's Dev from The Place, and today I got some breaking news from you. You heard it here first. Turns out Spider-Man, not a super popular set. Yeah, sorry for getting you all worked up there. I know it's not exactly the spiciest take you've heard this week, but I've heard a few people, more than a few actually, out there on Peter Parker's internet talking about how Spider-Man is one of the worst sets that WotC has ever printed in the history of WotC of the Coast, and I don't know if that's true. My knee-jerk reaction is to be like, well, it's not one of the worst sets, is it? You kind of have to question that assertion. I don't know when the last time I actually thought about what the worst sets of all time even are. And what are they in 2025, 2026, or 20XX, like it's a Mega Man game, whenever you happen to be watching this? I have looked through every set printed up until this current moment in time. That's a thing I actually did for this video. And I have refreshed my memory on what sets were actually poop, scientific term. So let's go through them today. What are the 10 worst sets in Magic history, and where does Spider-Man, and other universes beyond for that matter, fit into that equation? And I'm your favorite Magic channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech. And we're back with the honorable mention here, which you would think would not be super honorable this time around, but actually, I'm going to flip things. We're going to use this slot to honor a set that I think kind of takes a bad rap. Let's talk for just a second about Coldsnap before we start dumping on sets. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like everything about Coldsnap was awesome, especially the limited environment. I think that's where it takes most of its lumps, but that can't be all people remember about this set. I think it's actually a really memorable set. We got to go back to Ice Age, and Ice Age is really cool. You wouldn't think that revisiting mechanics like cumulative upkeep would be super good 10 or 12 years later, but we got Braid of Fire for our future commander decks. That adds a red every single turn, and it starts adding 2 red, then 3 red, then 4 red. It's kind of crazy. So that is a great card, but aside from commander, I guess there's also Orin Viper in most green decks, and like Thrumming Stone for your Persistent Petitioners or Ravenous Rats decks. There are some really relevant commander cards in this set, but there's also cards that have left a crazy mark on all kinds of competitive formats. You've got stuff like Rite of Flame or Red Ritual, while we're talking about red mana accelerants like Braid of Fire. Rite of Flame has seen a lot of play in a lot of decks over the years, but so has stuff like Dark Depths all the way back to Legacy, and for that matter, Counterbalance. You remember how annoying that card was? It came from Coldsnap. So again, I think that this set gets a really bad rap for a couple of fairly limited reasons, and I mean the pun there, but ultimately I think that this set continues to build the world of Ice Age in a way that I kind of liked. I like the new characters from it. I like revisiting the snow mechanic. I thought that was cool. I like the look of the set. The overall design was fine, and there's a bunch of pieces that have endured throughout Magic history, so we can probably stop talking about how Coldsnap is terrible now, especially since we got some new stuff to work with. Let's get to the main list here and actually talk about some kind of bad sets, and number 10 will not be the first time in this video that I actually have to kind of gut a set that I genuinely like, and that is Mercadian Masques, which I think just barely still makes this list. Now, there are a lot of reasons for sure why this didn't do super well when it came out, to say the least, and has failed in the intervening years to really stand the test of time. Maybe the most common stated one is the massive drop in power level between Urza's Block and Mass Block, which is a very real and true thing, but anyone else who was there at the time can attest to the fact we needed to turn the heat down from Urza's Block a little bit. That was a crazy year, and we can't do that forever. So it makes sense to kind of turn the volume from 10 down to 4, but I think they overcorrected and went all the way down to 1 on the power level on this one, and it shows. There's also the fact that, and I apologize in advance for saying this, but the mechanics in Mercadian Masques just not super interesting, or for that matter, very good. I hate to repeat myself. I've already said that the set definitely has a lower power level than the ones before it for the most part. But yeah, Mercenaries were just kind of bad the entire time, and Rebels would have to wait at least one set for Lin Civi to come out, and then Lin Civi was a whole other thing in competitive play. That was not fun either. But again, Mercadian Masques as a standalone set really didn't bring enough of its mechanics to the table, which is a common problem with old blocks. The big set comes out and then has to wait for the next couple of sets to fill the block out and put more stuff in these mechanics and flesh things out in Standard. That's true of a lot of older block first sets, but this one really suffered from that particular malady. One more thing I want to say about Mercadian Masques that I don't think people bring up enough is not only was there a massive power level change between Urza's Block and this set, but there was also kind of a massive aesthetic change. You look at the two different arts between Urza's Block and Mass Block, and Urza's Block has a lot of very enchanting, fantasy saturated, beautiful, for lack of a better word, I guess, art in the set, and Mercadian Masques doesn't. It's got a completely different aesthetic, which makes sense from set to set, but I'm just going to say that subjectively, the aesthetic overall of Mercadian Masques does not necessarily appeal to me, except for the cards High Market and Rashad and Port. Those are basically the only two cards that look good in the entire set to me on an aesthetic level, and I think that that is true for a lot of players at the time that were playing Magic, and I think that, again, that showed in some of the sales figures and just some of the sentiment towards this set, and that sentiment has not necessarily gotten any better over the years. But for number 9, we got to do a spicy pick. This is a YouTube list, baby, so we do have to make a hot take at some point in this video. Number 9 is Arabian Nights. Now, my contention here is that there are 5 good cards in Arabian Nights. You've got Bazaar of Baghdad, Library of Alexandria, City of Brass, Drop of Honey, Ali from Cairo. That's about it. I guess like Island of Whack Whack, which is like a Maze of Ith, but only against flyers. Like that's a pretty good card. There just aren't that many good cards in Arabian Nights. And for what it's worth, it's a really, really small set with, for what it's worth, and I think it is worth a pretty good chunk here, a pretty wonky rare distribution. Like imagine if you spend however many thousands of dollars it is, I don't even want to imagine, for a sealed pack of Arabian Nights and you ended up getting the sandals or something. Like, would you feel good about that? You wouldn't have felt good about it back then. And I know that every set has like feels bad rares, which is something maybe not every set should have necessarily, but still, I know every set has kind of not great rares in it, but you know, when you look at stuff like Island Fist Gisconius, you get to pass the part where it's cool. There is cool factor to this card. It's a giant island-sized fish with like trees growing on it. It's dope. But you look at the text box, actual worst card I've ever seen in my life. It is not good. And the whole set at every rarity level is full of cards like that. You seen Bird Maiden? Again, awesome looking card. Folio art. I'm always into that. But this is worse than a Windrake. And the set is full of cards like that. They're just really bad stuff in this thing. And the power level is definitely stratified. Again, I've already mentioned a bunch of extremely powerful cards from the set, so it's not like it doesn't have them, but those are like 5 cards. And the other 100+ cards in the set are not those cards. This was the origin of the Universes Beyond is bad for Magic thing. And I've been hearing it since I was literally 11 years old. We didn't know to call it Universes Beyond back then, but every dude at the card shop is like, well, this is stupid and it's not Magic and it doesn't have dragons. And it's, I know that a lot of people think that that argument has just been around for the last few years or whatever. Nope, I've been hearing it my entire freaking life, and a lot of that is because of Arabian Nights. So I probably shouldn't personally hold that against the set, but Again, I am, I guess. So, number 9, Arabian Nights. We're having fun. But forget about that entry. Let's just move on to number 8 before you track me down and beat me up. Number 8 is Oath of the Gatewatch. You remember this set? It's a set you probably haven't thought about in literally years. I'm almost sure, man. There was actually a bit of a fight for this slot between Oath and Battle for Zendikar, but in the end, I felt like Oath of the Gatewatch won out in sort of the war of the lifeless, bland Marvel plot copy and paste things. Just no one really cared about Oath when it came out, and that definitely showed. And to this day, like, name a card from Oath of the Gatewatch. That set has Eldrazi in it, so I guess if you said Kozilek, you win. But it's really hard to name basically any other card from Oath of the Gatewatch. This set was just bland. Toast. Just dry, butterless, jamless toast. Anyone going to go to the plate for Oath of the Gatewatch? I don't think that this set is going to be one that's, I was going to say remembered well throughout Magic history, but I just think remembered. I don't think this set is going to be one that's remembered. Let's go ahead and move on to number 7, because I don't have much to say about Oath of the Gatewatch. Who does? It's kind of the problem with this set. But number 7, I actually have a lot to say about, and I am again very sorry I have to do this with a set that I love this much, but it's Fallen Empires, which I think is still on this list in the modern age. It's just not good, guys. There are things that I really like about it. I have a lot of nostalgia for this set. This is the set that I kind of started Magic the Gathering with. You could go down to the comic shop back when I was 11 going into 12 years old and buy a pack of Fallen Empires for 88 cents, which was just a ridiculous deal. Even in back then dollars, I bought more packs of Fallen Empires Empires than I probably have of just about any Magic set ever. But there's a reason those packs were 88 cents. Now, the Dark already marked a pretty steep drop-off in power compared to some of the sets before it. But Fallen Empires really completed that cycle. And the sets after it, like Ice Age and Alliances, would be, with the exception of one notable one we'll get to later, would be much better in terms of power level than Fallen Empires. And that has endured all the way until today, man. If you look at Fallen Empires, there aren't a whole lot of cards worth more than a couple of dollars, and there's really nothing played in Commander whatsoever. You know, I can sit here and say that Conchorn is a good playable Commander card, but are you going to play it in Commander? Probably not. Nobody else is either, and really just about the only card from this set that saw that much play in the first place was, I guess, Hymn to Torak. It was more or less it, save for one or two very, very small pieces that popped up from time to time, but still, High Tide. I guess High Tide is maybe the best card in this entire set, and it still sees play in like certain decks nowadays. But altogether, Fallen Empires was just maybe the most famous time that the power level ever took a dive, and that made Magic almost cease to exist. Fallen Empires is a set that has its pros. For sure. You know, this is the first set where they did multiple art pieces for a bunch of different cards, and a lot of that art is really good. Aesthetically, Fallen Empires is a fantastic set, and I like some of the story that it's trying to tell. I like a lot of things about Fallen Empires from a thematic standpoint, but honestly, again, you look at some of these cards, there's a reason it's known the way it is. Now for number 6, we'll just look at a big fat stinker. It's just not a good set. Dragon's Maze, everybody, which does take a fair amount of hate, or at least it did at one point. But just like Oath of the Gatewatch and Battle for Zendikar, for what it's worth, this is another set that's just kind of been washed over by the sands of time. People barely remember that it even existed, which is a shame because, you know, Return to Ravnica, Gatecrash, these were fine sets with decent cards. People remember them, decent limited environments, and blah, blah. Whereas Dragon Maze just really came along and pooped the bed in terms of finishing that block. Just really weak finish to a strong block. And sometimes third sets have that sickness, but again, Dragon's Maze was really one of the worst examples of this. The limited environment was kind of jammed up by clue stones in this set at lower rarities. It turns out like every pack had a clue stone or two in it, so the last couple of picks would just be like, which of these 2 clue stones you want in every pack, which is just kind of a whole extra thing. But if you look back at all the cards from this set and like sort by price on Scryfall, the most expensive card in the entire set is $3. It's Master of Cruelties, and it's because he's awesome. Take a look at this card, by the way, if you haven't actually seen him before. He is very cool, but apart from this, there's just not really much memorable in Dragon's Maze, except for, I guess, Maze's End is in this set, but would you be surprised if I told you that card was like $2? Less, actually, than $2, I think. You shouldn't be, because Maze's End is not good. It's just not a very good Magic card, I'm sorry, but that kind of holds true for the entire set. Again, I think that we know generally, especially us old school players, that sometimes third sets in a block aren't really the absolute best, and Dragon's Maze is again one of, at least, the best examples of that. But what if, I ask you, a third set was not a weak finish to a strong block, but actually a weak finish to a weak block? That would have to be a very bad set indeed. So today I bring you, right smack dab in the middle of the list, Prophecy. Yeah, it's still bad. This is another one just like Fallen Empires where it's like, ooh, is Prophecy still on this list? Yeah, absolutely. It's not good. Even when you look through it nowadays, mechanically, it's a nightmare of mechanics that never worked in the first place. You know, you got this like, you got to have no untapped lands during your instep thing, and that's super clunky and weird. And then you famously got the Ristic mechanic, which isn't on just Ristic Study, which I guess another reason why this is one of the worst sets of all time is because it's responsible for Ristic Study. There's a tutor with Ristic on it. Saw 0 play because it turns out in competitive Magic a lot of the time, got a mana or 2 laying around. You know what I mean? It's just not a great mechanic from a lot of standpoints, and it turned out to be almost broken in Commander. Not broken, just really very annoying. Anytime anyone does a thing, oh, this triggers. Come on, man. I just want to play Magic. I want to spend all my mana and stuff. So I guess, again, being responsible for Ristic in general, both the bad and technically good things about it, will take you a long way in my book. Plus, this set has kind of some of the same problems as Mercadian Masques, only it doesn't really finish much of what Mercadian Masques started. Nemesis did that, the middle set in the block. Prophecy just has a bunch of like disparate mechanics that don't really fit in that well with the rest of the block, and it doesn't make any sense. Like, the best cards from this set, or at least the ones that are the most well remembered, are probably the avatars, and some of them are really cool. Avatar Woe is a dope Magic card. You could probably still get away with playing it in Commander, but I'm not sure, honestly. Tap, destroy a creature is just not the line of text it used to be, but still, there are cool things that are well remembered about this set. But all things considered, you go back and look through Prophecy and you're still like, okay, yeah, this actually is terrible is the word. I hate to use it, but Prophecy is a bad set to the bone. But at least it's Magic the Gathering. And don't worry, not every set for the rest of the list is going to be Universes Beyond, but couple of them are at least. So let's move on to Assassin's Creed here, which is bad for a lot of reasons. Again, it's one of those. Like, that's why it's so far down the list. It's like, I don't know, I can name like 4 or 5 things. But honestly, at the end of the day, it's also got kind of the Oath of the Gatewatch problem, where it's just kind of a boring, like uninspired set for the most part. Who actually wanted this? I'm sure like 3 guys, Josh, I'm really glad that you got your Assassin's Creed set, but for most people, I think that this just was kind of a skip, not a set they were super into. But if I had to say one positive thing about it, it would probably be all the assassin stuff. I like assassin themed stuff, and I'm glad that there's some like assassin specific cards in the set. That's cool. But all things considered, it's just a set full of cards you barely even know exist, and it's a small set too. It's one of those. Like, these are just typically terrible, and it's not the last time we'll see one of these small sets on this list either. There's a reason everybody hates these. You don't want to pay basically normal price for fewer cards in a pack. It's just not great, and especially when you're paying those prices for a bunch of cards you kind of don't want in the first place, and they're not really that mechanically unique, like at all. The design of a set as a whole is a mess. You can't really play limited with it. There's just a billion things wrong with Assassin's Creed. And as much as I like assassins as a creature type, and it kind of helps out there are just too many of those things to really, get it out of the doghouse here. But we are in the top 3, ladies and gentlemen. And number 3 is Spider-Man. Yeah, it's here. It's all the way down here at number 3 for a bunch of reasons. At least Assassin's Creed knew it was going to be a small set, knew that you couldn't try to draft it or anything like that. This product is what this product is. But Spider-Man is a massive design mess that it is very easy to see, or at least a lot of veteran players say it's easy enough to see, that this started life as either a smaller set or a commander-only set, or very likely both of those things, and then things got kind of shifted around and things had to change. And so now suddenly this is a larger standard set that still didn't get filled out all the way. It's only like 200 cards, a little bit over, right? So this is certainly not a very large set for standard. And it's also not one that is very fun or good to draft. There's not a whole lot of the mechanics. Like, there's only like 8 villains in the entire set, and villains is supposed to be a draft mechanic. It doesn't usually come together, and a lot of the mechanics in the set are like that. Web slinging and mayhem are not bad mechanics necessarily. They're just also relatively uninspired mechanics that are not necessarily supported enough. Mayhem is supported enough. There's a bunch of stuff in the set that lets you discard things, but not enough good mayhem stuff at the lower rarities to really fill out your deck and create a mayhem deck. So limited is an absolute mess. They just didn't really solve that problem the way they wanted to. And when it comes to the overall design of the set, there are just too many Spider-Men. I'm sorry. I'm glad that we got a Peter Porker. Most people hate Peter Porker for whatever reason because they don't want joy in their lives, but I love this card. That said, I don't think we needed every single iteration of Spider-Man that's ever existed in the entirety of the world. I'm just not sure that's something that a lot of people enjoy. And for what it's worth, this is also subjective, but I just am with the majority, I think, at the player base that New York City, cool to see it in a Magic set, doesn't jive. It just doesn't feel at all like Magic the Gathering. And this is probably the set that is most true of all time. Ultimately, Spider-Man is a set that I think is going to bother people when they look through sets for the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. I'm not sure that Spider-Man can necessarily rehab its image, even though, again, there are things I like about this set. There's enough that I completely understand the backlash against that I do think it belongs in the top 3 worst. Now, my number 2 is Homelands, which crushes me. I was really hoping that, just like Fallen Empires, this is one that would make it out of the grinder, but you look back at it, and it may actually be the lowest power level set ever printed in the history of Magic, which I do think when you're looking at worst sets holds a lot of weight. The upside to Homelands is that it does feel like a Magic the Gathering set, at least a lot more than Spider-Man does, but not even that can save it. When you're looking at such awful pieces of cardboard, dude, I guess Primal Order is kind of good. Beyond that, everything else is it sucks eggs, and before you go to the comment section to say serrated arrows to me or something, serrated arrows famously showed up in Type 2 standard sideboards, notably at the time, because your deck had to include cards from every single set in standard. Can you imagine if we had that rule nowadays? Standard be like a singleton format with all these sets, waka waka, but still, that's the only reason that we saw stuff like, serrated arrows and sometimes Mesa Falcon. The CGB story is true. Sometimes you have to play Homelands cards because it's literally in the rules. When you do that, things like Mesa Falcon show up. They were never actually good Magic cards. So you look at Homelands and you just see a bunch of absolute garbage heap, trash pile, not good cards. And that is still true today. And again, I think that holds weight when we're talking about what are the worst and best sets to ever exist. And for what it's worth, I guess the last point I'll make about Homelands is that basically every player thought that the set was very bad. And it's one of the only sets in Magic history to this day that the designers actually agree with us about. Richard Garfield, creator of Magic the Gathering, famously did not want the set to even go to print in the first place. But Peter Adkison had already promised the two designers of the set that it would go to print. And if I remember this story correctly, everything I've said up to now about this story is correct. That Garfield didn't want it to go to print. Peter Adkison had promised two designers. That's all true. But my understanding of these two designers that did the bulk of Homelands is that they weren't much more than fans. They weren't like professional game designers, which again shows in the cards. And even to this day, a little bit in the future after Homelands was released, I should say, Mark Rosewater admitted that the set is, quote, poorly designed. And it's not often that you hear the creator and the head designer talk about how bad a set really was. We shouldn't even print this thing, said Richard Garfield. So that's one where old Dick was correct. For sure, Homelands still holds up as maybe the worst set of all time, but not quite the absolute worst. Now, I think the distinction for actual worst Magic set of all time goes to Mom Aftermath, just because of all the crap they tried to pull with this set. It's effectively Assassin's Creed, but in standard, which is way, way worse when you think about it. Now, I'll give you that this one, too, feels more like Magic the Gathering than some of the things we've covered. It feels more like Magic than Assassin's Creed, but I would rather have Assassin's Creed as like a not standard legal set that I'll probably never actually interact with in my life, even at a commander table, than a thing that basically has to be in standard and whose merchandising philosophy is actually evil. This is another one where the packs are smaller in terms of how many cards you get, and in some cases cost more than an actual just normal pack, a draft pack of Magic cards, which is unconscionable. This set was so ill received by fans that it scared them off of doing the big score, and they had to incorporate the big score into Outlaws of Thunder Junction. I am pretty sure that they had originally planned for big score to be exactly like Aftermath, but Aftermath failed so abjectly that they pulled back on big score and decided to just kind of randomly seed those cards into Outlaws packs. And it made sense. I'd have been scared too. Ultimately, the reason why this ended up as number one on my admittedly subjective lists of worst sets of all time is not because it has bad Magic cards like Homelands or Fallen Empires. It's not because it's not super aesthetically pleasing like a Mercadian Masque. It's not even because it doesn't feel like Magic and I got to look at it like a bagel and schmear in New York City, like it's Spider-Man or something. This one, I just don't love because of the marketing and distribution practices inherent in how they tried to push this set on Magic players in Standard. And that is way worse to me at the end of the day than having to deal with, well, this card sucks. This one doesn't feel like Magic. No, this one actually actively feels like corporate greed, and to me, that's the bottom of the barrel. Ultimately, Assassin's Creed is at least honest. You know what I mean? It's hey, it's a small set, you can't really draft it, but you probably never even have to run into it, so don't worry about it. Just buy it if you like Assassin's Creed, that's who it's for. And we're oh, cool. This, you actually must interact with if you want to play Standard for whatever reason. It's just a way to make you open more packs on Arena and blah-de, blah-de, blah. So, again, this was kind of a naked set in terms of all the nasty stuff they did with it in marketing and distribution and forcing you to get packs of it on Arena. All that stuff is just gross and I hate it. So again, worst set of all time, and a lot of people have given a lot more eloquent reasons for why than I have. But that's Allski Kowalski for now. Again, just let me know how you felt about all this stuff down there in the comments section. I want to know if I missed a terrible set, or maybe you think that, I don't know, Prophecy doesn't deserve to be here or something like that. We can throw down or whatever. I'm not going to throw down, but we can talk about it. Discuss over coffee in the comment section. But apart from that, do the YouTube stuff on your way out. Just make sure you hit the button shaped like a thumb. It looks like this. Just picture that. Hold that image in your mind and then press that button. You can also hit the subscribe button down there. We're trying to get to 150K and we're on our way. Be part of that journey. But apart from that, we have a Patreon as well. Just $1 a month to get in there and vote on stuff. We're about to talk about the top 5 Pauper decks, a format I haven't covered in a few years, but it kind of smashed the Patreon poll. Like everyone wanted to see that video. So if you do too, that's going to be our next video. Thank the patrons. You should be one. Anyway, I guess that really is all I've got. That is Itski Lewitsky, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Dev from the place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.